Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I thought I'd pop by and create a little video with my new release. So I've got my card, she says as she's frantically trying to put stuff everywhere. My card is 4.5 inches by 6.5 inches. And I thought we'd coordinate this with a previous release. And as Tracy's talking here, she's realised that she hasn't got her pens out to colour with, which is not a good start. So let's do that now, and then we're not doing it later. The problem is I tidy up each time after a project if I can, because my head gets scrambled. So because I tidied up, sometimes when I start another project I keep thinking the projects are all out and I'm ready to start. I'm dangerous at times. Anyway, so a piece of Pink Frog smooth card, and it's 300 GSM, 4.5 by 6.5. Okay, let's make sure you can all see properly. Let's just move up a little bit there and just make sure you can all see that. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'd start by using one of my older sets first. So I'm going to use my Wildflower because I thought this clock image on its own would go lovely with one of the A7 florals that are in my new release. So she says, so this A7 floral is called The Good, and there's two A7 stamps and they go beautifully together. Do you like how I've scrunched my mask? But they go beautifully together. This one is Periwinkle and this one is The Good. So I thought I'd use The Good, which is 986. So let's just pick that little bit of a mask up. I just keep them in a little wallet because then everything just stays where I want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this clock image first, because I do love to show how the brand new releases work with the older releases. Now this stamp set is 986 and you can see how long ago this was. This is 565, but it doesn't matter what the numbers are, it doesn't matter when they were released, they all work beautifully together. So what I'm going to do is grab, and also my husband as usual has been in the craft room and taken the kitchen roll, the little bit that I had left. Oh, everybody takes my craft stuff, they can't help themselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink this clock image, and if you look at the image, it's got other details around the clock, which I don't necessarily need. I mainly want the clock. I don't mind if I get a little bit of the text and the numbers. I don't mind that at all. So what I'm going to do is ink sort of using the edge of my VersaFine Clair Nocturne, sort of using the edge of that ink pad to just pick up the detail on the edge of that clock. So let's just go round. Now again, with your clock image, because it's going to be a background element, it doesn't really matter if you've got bits missing. So don't worry about that at all. As long as you've got something that looks like a clock or part of a clock, it's absolutely fine. And what I'm going to do is just use my kitchen roll. I'm not going to scrape it across. I'm just going to wipe gently just across the edges to make sure that perhaps I haven't got something that I don't want. So I'm just wiping across the edge just to make sure that I haven't got too much other detail that I really am not too bothered about. It's just mainly the clock that I would like. And then you forget which bit you've wiped, so you do it all over again. And what you can do is you can just look at your stamp and just, I haven't got any there, you have. So you can just look at your stamp and just make sure that you haven't got ink anywhere that you don't need it. So I'm just going to go round and just give that a wipe. And the good thing is that the VersaFine Clair Nocturne has got a really good open time, which is perfect, because that means you don't have to be in a rush. I don't like rushing the process. And I think that's what I like about demonstrating on YouTube or in the online workshops, is I don't feel rushed to do the process. So we're going to add that now. Just making sure that there's not areas that sort of look. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stamp the clock. Just going to place that sort of there and just press on the clock area really. Doesn't matter if I get a few extra details, that's not a problem, but just pressing on that clock a little bit, just so that the clock area is a reasonable image. I can also lift that acrylic block just to make sure that I've got plenty of that detail. And also it's good if it's actually a little bit distressed as well, because it just adds to the effect. There you go. So what you've got is you've got your clock, and mine's a little bit distressed just the way I want it. So you saw me wipe some areas just so it's a little bit distressed, so that it adds to your background. So it's just a background element. If you want it a lot darker, you can go in and colour your black in if you wish. I would even like it even more distressed, but if you want it to be totally black, then you can just go in and colour that in with your micron pen. But I don't want that. So what I've got then is I'm going to take the A7 stamp, which is 986, the good, and then grab a piece of scrap paper. And what we're going to do is just stamp our floral. Now, even though this is an A7 stamp, this is a really good size image. It's not tiny, it's a really good focal image. So let's just place this round here. I've got this cut out, you'll be pleased to know. But if I just stamp this, just so that you can see the floral image stamped. Now with this, you could quite easily just stamp like that, add a little bit of colour around the outside, add the sentiment here, and your card's done. Just works beautifully. So I do love that you can also do something that is quite simple. Right, so you'll be pleased to know that I've done a little bit of cutting out before the video. So let's bring these in. So what I've done is, if we bring the original image in so you can see that on there. No, it's better to bring the packaging in, I think, just so you can see that there. What I've done is I've cut one out on its own, and I've cut one out and showed you two ways that you can cut them out. You can either leave the white area in here, or before you cut anything out, the first thing you can do is pierce this little bit here and then cut that out if you wish. It's entirely up to you how you want to cut them out. But I literally just placed it on a squashy mat. You can use a mouse mat, and I pierced a hole in here and then just got my scissors in there and cut round. So it's entirely up to you what you want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a little bit of colour to my background. And what I want to use is, I want to use, first of all, antique linen. So I'm just going to use some antique linen. And this is a really juicy ink pad. So I'm pressing very gently with the direct to paper, very gently indeed. Don't sort of do too much. Now, the thing that you need to do, obviously, this image is quite distressed, which is what I wanted. Now, if you've got something that you've stamped and it's very black, make sure that you just give that a little blot, especially if yours is very black, because this ink, when you do direct to paper, sits on the top of the card. Let me show you. Let me see if I can whittle this a little bit. There you go. You can see the shine on that. Now, this isn't shiny card. That's the pigment lying on the surface. So that's because I'm doing the direct to paper. So let's just add a little bit more. Just direct to paper. There we go. That's enough. So that's antique linen. And it's a colour I've not used very frequently. So what I like to do sometimes, if I'm ever stuck for inspiration, sometimes I'll go through my colours and think, what haven't I used for a long time, and work with them. Tea dye is another one I've not used very frequently, and those two colours happen to go together. So I'm going to use the tea dye. And again, I'm going to use that tea dye very gently on the card. I'm not pressing too hard. You're sort of making your hand a little bit limp so that it's very gently touching that card. And each time you add the next layer, you need to be even more gentle than the first layer. The main reason being, you don't want to cover up the first layer. You want to be able to see that first layer of colour. You don't actually want to obliterate the first colour. And you just create a nice distressed background, which goes perfectly with your distressed clock. Right. So what I thought then is, I then looked at these two colours and I realised I've not used them for a bit. So I thought, what would go with them? So I decided I would use aged mahogany, which is also a lovely colour. But I just want to be very gentle because, again, naturally, because I've not used these ink pads very much, they're very juicy. So you just need to be aware of that. So just make sure you don't put on too much pressure. There we go. So we can then just give that a little bit of a wipe. Now what I'm going to do is take one of the new stencils. This is one of my new stencils that's also going to be on the TV on Monday the 17th and Tuesday the 18th. It's called Whirly Whizzers. So I'm going to use this one. So let's just take that out of the plastic, I can't speak, plastic packaging, which I should have done before the video, but there you go. So let's just have that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use parts of it. So let's move those florals out of the way. I'm going to use the aged mahogany. So what I'm going to do is just pick sort of randomly a little bit of the area on my stencil. So I'm just going to pick a small area of the stencil. Then what I'm going to do is just spritz that with water. So I've spritzed that with water, and if we move that out of the way, if I lift that to camera, you can see it's shining. That means there's plenty of water on there and I'll get a good print. Now what I want to do is make sure that I wipe any ink just from around the edges. Now what I'm trying to show is, because I often do demonstrations a certain way, so often you'll see me do my background first, then add my background imagery, then add my focal imagery. What I'm trying to show you here is there's always ways to break supposedly rules, because as far as I'm concerned, there are no rules in craft, apart from if you want good quality results, you use good quality products that are made for purpose. That's it. If you want to do it in whatever order you want, that's absolutely fine. Now this time I did the stamped image first that was distressed, and then added the distressed background over the top. And now I've got my stenciled piece to add to the background. So what I'm going to do is just add that to the background. And if I just press that, it will just lift up some of the excess ink and water from that stencil. That's the only reason I use the kitchen roll, because if I use my hand, it's not absorbent, so it won't absorb any of the excess moisture. So say I've added too much moisture, this will do the job for me and just blot that up. So it just blots the ink for me. Then what I can do is lift that. Beautiful. Then what you can do, if you want it just a little bit more subtle so that it's not overtaking your background, just look how wonderful this stencil looks with the background underneath. So those open areas give you a different look with your stencil. Just gorgeous. What I'm going to do then is use what's left on the stencil, and let's put that down this half. And what I'm trying to show you is just because a stencil's 6x6 doesn't mean you have to use it that way. Not at all. So let's just give that a really good blot, and you can see it just picks a little bit of ink up there, and just lift that up, and you've just got a bit of stenciling. Let's lift it up in the background. Just a little bit of stenciling. If you want to add more, you can quite easily add more. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more detail. So I'm going to take maybe a couple of these little whirly whizzers. Now what I thought about this stencil is, imagine if you colour this in blues, it could quite easily pass as snowflakes, quite easily. Because, you know, it's nice to have something a bit different. So what I'm going to do is spritz, again, that little bit of stencil with water. I'm then going to turn that over as before and just add that little bit of detail. So what I'm showing here is that you can just pick out parts of that stencil. So let's just... And look how much ink that picks up, the ink and the moisture from the stencil. That's much better. So we'll just give that a wipe now. So just beautiful. I love how you can see through the stencil to where I've dragged the inks, which just looks so lovely. Really like that. Right, so let's just dab this dry. So I'm not drying it with my heat tool, I'm just dabbing the colour off. I've still got some of that oxidisation because I spritzed with water. Sometimes it's difficult to see in a photograph, but you can see that that's oxidised, and you can still see the detail through the stencil, which I adore. Right, did I leave the other stamps out? Probably not, but what's new? So let's move these new stamps out of the way. And what I'm going to do is just grab one of my text stamps. So what I'm going to do is grab Bulb Gazette. Bulb Gazette 907. So you can see I'm mixing and matching across the range, which is what I love doing. Now what I want to do is I want to add some brown ink. So there's several browns in the VersaFine Clair range. So I don't like to go straight to my project. What I like to do is test it. So I'm going to just grab that Bulb Gazette and let's just test the colour of that ink. So yes, it's very brown. Let's have a look at one of the other browns, which of course is never where you want it, is it? So we've got Fallen Leaves, which I'm sure is very dark. And then we've got Pine Cone. So I'm not going straight to my project. I'm testing it first. Well, I'm not. I'm wiping it all over my non-stick craft sheet. So this one is Pine Cone. So then I'll just test that. So I'm just testing it on a bit of card. So I think because this pine cone, again, is a reasonably dark colour, and I think just to give a little bit more contrast, I'm going to go with the lighter of the browns, which in this case is acorn. Now, you don't have to have acorn ink. You can use your distress oxides. Because of that opaque quality, you can stamp with the oxides beautifully. But just remember, the oxides are not a permanent ink, but the VersaFine Clairs are. So if you're putting anything on the top that's going to move the inks, you need a permanent ink. So let's make sure we've got the stamp the right way. And what I'm going to do is just ink a little bit of that text up. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to press it. You're going to see me just place that down onto the card and then so that's it. That's all I'm going to do, because then you just get a soft, subtle stamping in the background. So I'm going to repeat that, just adding a little bit of the stamping. Again, I'm just going to take the stamp, just place it on there, no pressure, and just rub over gently with my finger and just add a little bit of stamping. Just beautiful. Now what I want to do is just leave that background stamping for the moment until we start to work with our florals. So what I'm going to do now is bring the florals in, and we're going to colour those. There we go. Let's grab our pens. So what I'm going to do is use my Ecolines. Sometimes I change to pencils to pens, and I probably will start using some different pens as well, just because I've got them in my collection. So we've got mahogany and reddish brown, that's fine. So what I like to do is I don't like to move too quickly from one lot of pens to another, because not everybody can afford everything. So it's nice just to use something quite frequently. Let's have a look at mahogany, just see if it's, you see the mahogany, it's as you would expect, it's like mahogany brown. I don't want that one. Now those of you that do swatches, you'll go straight to your swatch. I'm afraid I still come to the card before I use it and test my colours. That's just me. It's the way I am. Let's just bring this in. So that is more of a pink, and we'll have that. So that's scarlet. So we've got scarlet and reddish brown. So I'm going to bring in my florals, and I'm going to colour them one at a time. And this time I'm going to give the colours reddish brown, which is Ecoline brush 422 first. So I'm just going to use the 422, the reddish brown. There we go. But this time I'm not going to blend with water, she says. Let's just see if it works when I just blend pen to pen. So then I'm going to go to the scarlet, which is 334, and I'm just going to blend that just with the scarlet. Just blend it with the scarlet. So I'm not using water to blend that. I'm just blending the pen to pen. If you want to blend that with water, that's absolutely fine. But I'm sure that if you touch these, if you touch the dark one to the light one, you can actually change the colour and blend it that way. So if you wanted, you could add the dark to the pen, allow it to absorb in, and then as you colour, it's dark and it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. So you can add, it's very difficult to see in camera, but it does go slightly darker and down to the lighter colour. So you can do it that way if you wish. It's entirely up to you. So just colour how you wish. But I like to find different ways as well. So what I'm going to do then is just put a little bit of the same colours at the edges of the petals as well. I'm going to leave the centre area just free. I couldn't get my words out. Just so that it will just shine more if I leave a little bit of the area free. Just leave the centre area free. Now, if you, where's my water brush? Just having a quick look. Is that it? Yes. So if you want to blend, I'm just trying to show you different ways here. If you want to blend, I think that was pink rather than red, but if you want to blend, then you can obviously just use a bit of water and blend the colours. It's entirely up to you. But for me, sometimes when it's a very small area, you don't really need to blend much with your water. That's just a personal choice, but I like to give you options. So I'm going to just add a little bit of colour just there. So if I leave a little bit of this white here, it just makes it shine a little bit, like it's got a shine. So let's go to our next flower and do exactly the same. So I just colour one flower at a time, mainly because I don't like to rush. And sometimes if you try to do too many things at once, that's when you make mistakes and forget which pens you're using on which and which colours. And so I like to just take my time and colour a flower at a time. There we go. So I'm just adding the colour a little bit there, just to the edges of the petals as well. And when I cut them out, I did leave a little border around the edge. Now, obviously, I'm demonstrating, so sometimes I do things in a different order to how you would when you're at home, because most of the time we would probably colour first and then cut out, but I did my cutting so that you didn't have to wait. So just adding a little bit of the red. So again, we've sort of got a little bit of shine to the flower. If you don't like leaving that white area, you can just add in your white afterwards. So we've got the floral that we did on its own. We're just going to colour that as well. I do love how soft these sort of brush pens are. I've also got the clean, the Kuretake clean brush pens, are they? So I might start using them as soon as I haven't used them for a bit, and it's just nice to get the use out of the products that you've spent money on. So again, if you want to blend those colours with a little bit of water, that's absolutely fine. The reason I'm not doing that is because the area is so small, it doesn't really need that. You get the effect just with blending with the pen to pen. There we go. So we'll just put the lids on those. And we've got our florals here. Again, a really good size, so it works beautifully. And then I'm going to use my white gel pen. And what I'm going to do is just add some white in there. Now, there's no point adding white if the colours underneath aren't dry, because the white won't show. So I'm just adding a little bit. Let me see if I can also show you that. I'm just adding that's a few dots of white just to the centre area and coming into the petals, just to give a little bit more brightness just to that flower. And sometimes in camera you might think, well, that doesn't really make much difference, but in real life you can actually really see the difference when you just add a few little dots to your florals. So I'm just going to, but if your gel pen isn't working, just make sure that whatever you're trying to put the gel pen on is dry. So just add those. Okay, so then we can look at our arrangement. So I want to start with this one first, so you can decide where you want to put your florals. So, you know, don't forget the clock image is just a background, so you want to cover some of that up. So it's just meant to be part of the background. And you can look, if you've got a phone or anything, look in the camera, because that really helps with your composition. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we've got this floral on first. So let's grab that. So what I'm going to do is make sure I've got a little bit of adhesive just down here. And then I'm not going to stick that floral there. I'm just going to add some of my pin flare to this floral here. I like to leave some florals so they're not stuck. So I want that a little bit higher up there, and don't press down too much. So then the next floral is going to be about there, do we think? Oh yes. So then, and you'll often see me put it back on the card, take it back off the card. That's just what I do, just to get my composition right. And the little stems, I always sort of add a little bit of the tonic glue, and then for dimension add my pin flare or ultra thick gel medium or whatever you wish. So let's add that there, like so. And then this one, I'm just going to give a little bit more shape, just so it looks a little bit different. And you can also pinch them if you wish, just so that it looks a little bit different. And the petals have got a little bit more life. So let's just add the adhesive down the bottom, just so that that just grabs a hold. And then we'll just add a little bit of the pin flare. Just make sure that's up to the top. There we go. And then with your last flower, just take a little bit of time. You may want it here, so that your clock's at the back. You know what I'm like, I do tend to like a sort of a cluster. Let me just get rid of that bit of glue, and just a little bit of a cluster there, just so that you can see that. It just works really nicely just to have that cluster. There we go. So what I'm going to do then is just add a little bit of shading just under this clock, just with my Inktense pencil, my grey Inktense. Oh, got an itchy eye. I'm sure I've got another grey Inktense pencil, so I can tell you the numbers. Let's see if I have. Yes, Inktense Chinese ink 2030. Just in case you're looking for that in your Inktense collection. Right, so then now we want to make sure that that reddish brown is completely off that water brush. If you've got lots of brushes, you can have lots of brushes out ready. So then we'll just take that and we'll just go around. So I'm just bringing out the darkness. And I'm going to take off the excess and then I'm going to blend that out. A little bit more water and just blend a little bit of that out. And if you're not happy that you've got enough shading, just dip onto your pencil. But remember, these are not woodless pencils, so just be careful about adding water direct to your pencil. You just need to be very careful. Let's just blend that out to nothing. There you go. And then I'm just going to add some white splatters before I add a little bit more text and a sentiment. So let's add some splatters. And I always like to make sure that some of those splatters hit the darker areas, because then it just gives a little bit more brightness. Let me just pick that up and give the area a clean. And then just so that you can see, just works beautifully. A lovely flower to colour. So what I'm going to do then on the stamp set, let's just bring this in. You've got Grown with Love, Focus on the Good, and there is, it's typical, it's under, I've stamped it out before. Something about, where's my stamp? Right in front of me, Tracy. Let's place take time to appreciate the beauty of the flowers. So there's a little sentiment on there that doesn't take up too much detail. It's a very tiny text, and the reason for that is so you can use it as a background as well, okay, which we're going to do. So we're just going to add that. Let's take our sentiment. Focus on the good. Let's have that one. And we only need an A7 acrylic block for that. So let's take that. And we just want a piece of white card. I always, have you noticed I look at the back? That's because sometimes I pick up the packaging from the stamp and I actually stamp on that and totally forget. I'm good like that. So sentiments that are not too overpowering sometimes is all you need. There we go. Tell you what, it's so easy to lose the acetate pieces from the stamps, especially on your desk. And I love it because sometimes a project doesn't need a big bulky sentiment. So am I going to add a black edge to this or not? Now I'm going to faff for ages. I like it there. So I'm going to put a little bit of a black edge. You can use your Nocturne ink if you wish. I'm using a Posca pen just to add the edging to that little sentiment to give it a faux black matte. Let's just wipe that up. And what I like to do is just give that a couple of seconds to dry. The Nocturne ink obviously would take longer to dry, and then when you pick it up you end up with it all over your finger. So that's why I sometimes use the Posca pen. So I'm going to give that a little bit of dimension. Like so, with a little bit of the pin flare. And again, you can see that I'm sticking to the cluster just here. And sometimes if you change the position of something, even if you've made a card once, you can make it a second time, change the positioning of the florals and the clock, and it looks completely different. So what I'm going to do then is grab the Bulb Gazette once again, and I'm going to take the ink, the Acorn ink once again, and I'm just going to add a little bit more stamping. Again, not pressing on, just lightly pressing, just to extend the length of that stamping. Just beautiful. Then I'm going to add a little bit more of the Posca, because I just want a few more better splatters. So what I've done is I've sort of shaken the pen, just give that till the paint flows, and then I will just get better and bigger splatters. So that's why I've done that. Just give that a wipe again. And then we can add our beautiful bird. So let's just take our Bulb Gazette and just place that back. How good am I? So then I'm going to use the Quill Ends stamp set, because that bird always sits beautifully, just to give me an extra little touch. So we now want him in the foreground. So I'm just going to take him and I'm going to stamp that onto the white card, like so. Not even using an acrylic block, just using as is. As you can see now, I've got a few bit of grubby hands. So then I'm going to cut the bird out. If you're prone to touching your work and you get your fingers all over the work, just make sure you blot your image, just to make sure you don't smudge the black and your image remains crisp and clear. There we go. So bring this in, and then I've got my little bird. So I'm going, don't move that, and I want him just there, which means I need a little bit extra pin flare, just so he's raised. There we go. If you want to raise something and you don't have pin flare, use a little piece of a shard of mount board, or use your foam mats and then add a bit of adhesive on the top. I'm going to faff, because that's just me all over. And then what we'll do is we will add this to a black mat. So that was 4.5 by 6.5, and this is 1/4 of an inch bigger. And I'm adding that mat so that it echoes this clock and the bird here. On this occasion, the black mat works beautifully. So I'll add that. Just add this to our card. And I always try to make sure I've sort of got one edge almost, you know, where I want it to be. And then I can faff a little bit just before the adhesive grabs hold. If I've just moved that a bit. I've then got a 5 by 7 inch card blank. Let's make sure we've got it folding the right way. And then just add our adhesive. I'm adding some adhesive to the centre just to make sure that adheres securely. Again, just make sure you've sort of got it in place, and then I can just manoeuvre that a little bit. Let's just bring that in, press that down. There we go. And then we'll show you our finished card. So this, and the flower looks like it's got some shine. I just love it, and it showcases perfectly how you can incorporate your older images, your stencils, change the way you do the backgrounds, and it just gives you a beautiful composition. So I hope you enjoyed that. Love to all, and thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.